Hello guys, and welcome back to Joe's Ventures, and today we're going to be doing another episode of our Planet Zoo Mod Spotlights. I've got a lot of these to go through, but it's really exciting talking about all these really cool animals people are making, especially like through our second big, or third really big fish revolution, revolution, not resolution. English, weird, eh? But we're taking a look at some of the wonderful animals that we share our world with today, and we're going to be starting off with more fishes from Leaf and Buffzoo, good old Leaf and Buffzoo. We're going to be starting off with someone you're probably pretty familiar with. We have got the common Pleco, so a really cool little guy here. Let's see if I find him in the water. Look at these little fellows. So this is the common Pleco. The scientific name is Hyperostomus plecostomus, which is also known as the common Pleco or the sucker-mouthed catfish. These guys are tropical freshwater fish that belong in the family of armored catfish. And they're kind of named they're named because they have these armored-like scoots from the upper part of their head and down their body. And while their body is kind of also got soft skin around it as well. So this species naturally, in its natural range, is found in northeastern South America. So it's found in northern Brazil, the Guianas, Trinidad and Tobago. But it has been introduced to a lot of places around the world, such as Sri Lanka and stuff, United States as well, because of both the fish trade, because they're quite a common aquarium fish, and they often get released. And they're also considered to be potentially more species in that, obviously taxonomy being taxonomy. But in terms of their diet, they are known for their sucker-like mouth, which they get the name of sucker-mouthed catfish. They're able to adhere to a surface and also hold and rasp at food. So they're almost that's why they get the name the sucker-mouthed catfish, which I think is really cool. And in terms of their diet, they're an omnivorous species, so they're pretty generalist. They'll feed on algae, aquatic plants, and also things like small crustaceans, which is pretty cool. And they're also one of the many species of fish that are able to breathe air. So they will rely on its gills for respiration in normal and slightly hyponic water, but when there's less oxygen present, there's a lot of freshwater fish will do this, they will come to the surface to breathe, where the air is taken to the stomach and the oxygen is absorbed, and the air can also be kept in the stomach to increase their buoyancy. That helps them feed on vegetation, so that's another cool adaptation that they have. Helps them take advantage of different food resources. And in the aquariums, they typically, there's a number of species referred to as the common Pleco, but these guys, often they're sold as being young and quite small, but they can grow up to about 50 centimeters or 20 inches long, so obviously not the best fish to keep in your little tank in your lounge there. And these guys are often purchased to clean algae from fish tanks, but they also contribute a lot of waste to the nitrogen cycle, which can be also bad. They're also difficult for other fish to harass, both because of their semi-aggressive nature and they also have thick armor, so they're good with other fish, especially other big fish, but you obviously need a big tank for these big fish. So yeah, pretty cool guys. I think came out really well. Also done by Leaf and Buffzoo. Really cool little guys. So now we're going to move on to our next fish species, also done by Leaf and Buffzoo. We have got the marbled pike cichlid. So we can have a look at them over here. Look at these wonderful little guys. So, in terms of just the genus, these guys are a genus of cichlids, also known as the pike cichlids. They are found mostly in tropical and subtropical freshwater habitats from the Andes and the Atlantic. Between the Andes and the Atlantic. And the smallest species in this group is the sea walleri species group, which grows no larger than 6 to 14 centimeters, but or about 24 to 55 inches, and they qualify as dwarf cichlids by the aquarium hobby. But the bigger pike cichlids can grow about 50 centimeters or 20 inches long, and they're actually known to be quite aggressive and voracious, so that's a thing to let keepers beware of. They could eventually eat a lot of smaller fish and potentially even harass bigger fish. Most species range between 15 to 30 centimeters, 6 to 12 inches, and it's a really interesting how they get the name the pike cichlid. It seems they have a lot of convergent evolution. It look very similar to like a pike, being also quite predatory, so that's really cool. Their typical habitat is freshwater and tropical freshwater water and like South America. So east from the Andes, ranging from Trinidad and the Guiana Shield, so into Orinoco River, and through the Amazon, into the Rio de la Plata basins, and also found as Rio Negro and Argentina. Although they're quite widespread, there's individual species that are often quite restricted to these basins, and there's estimated about 93 species recognized in these genuses. But they are found in a wide variety of habitats, including rivers, streams, ponds, and lakes. And the vast majority of these guys are quite predatory, and they feed on fish, insects, and other small animals. They usually place themselves in an area where they can stay undetected from their prey, and so an example of this would be something like a sunken tree stem or behind a rock. And their behavior is, as well as their kind of body shape, is very, very convergently evolved to the unrelated group pikes that come from the whole Arctic, and as they get their name, the pike cichlids, their common name. So yeah, that's really, really cool. And the species here is, I believe, Senecalia matrimona. That's the particular species this is, the the marbled pike cichlid. These guys are native to the Amazon River basin, only found in the southern tributaries and found in the Manariwa and the Jacunda rivers. And this species typically reaches about 28 centimeters long, so it's kind of in that mid-size or average size range of cichlids, the pike cichlids. So yeah, really another cool animal done by Leaf and Buffzoo. Moving on to the next one, of course, we're going to do this lightning speed, because why not? We have got these really cool guys here. These are by Buffzoo, Leaf, and Jen. These guys are the butterfly peacock bass. So these guys, Cecilia aurealis, these guys are a very large cichlid that is found in South America. And they're actually a prize game fish as well. They typically get about 74 centimeters or 29 inches in length, and they're native to the Manawanjin and Esposito drainages of the Guianas and the Orinoco River in Brazil. They've also been introduced to other regions such as Florida, Hawaii, and Puerto Rico. And there's some uncertainty exists of its exact identity, though there could be potentially hybrids and things like that. It's always very confusing. They're very similar in body size compared to, and also in shape, to the largemouth bass, but these guys typically get about 29 inches, but average 2 to 14 inches, or 3 to 360 millimeters in length. You can see their body colors are kind of green and light yellows and stuff, and their most prominent feature is kind of this big black stripe, 3 vertical stripes that go around their back like that. And in terms of their spawning habits, they tend to spawn between April and September, with their height in May and June. And these guys will create large surfaces that are hardened down near the shore to find an area to spawn. And once the eggs are laid, both adults are responsible for protecting these eggs from predators. They also, in terms of growth, growth from spawn is average of 2 to 4 inches, and it progresses rapidly through the first 16 to 18 months of their life. So upon additional growth beyond their age, they can potentially put up to 1.5 pounds and an extra inch growth in a year, I believe. Average lifespan for these guys is about 6 to 10 years. And in terms of their origins habitat, they tend to thrive in warm, slow-moving bodies of water that includes lake, ponds, canals, and rock pits. And these are like shaded areas under trees and bridges and things, and they quite like that. And in terms of their fishing and ecological habits, they tend to feed on smaller fish. Like in Florida, they actually have aided in managing tilapia and oscar populations, where we once had threat because of overpopulation. And they primarily feed on fish that allows them to balance a lot of these habitats. And they typically feed during the daylight hours, where visibility is better for hunting, and they use their large mouth and incredible fast speed to catch prey. And as I mentioned, they are a prize game fish. They are the most popular sport fish in South Florida, and millions of fishermen every year try to collect these bass, and obviously with about $8 million combined in resource and efforts. They're available to boat fishermen along with fishermen on the shore, and yeah, they are a common fish, and people apparently like to eat them as well. And yeah, really cool fish and really unique colors. So that was again done by Leaf, Buffzoo, and Jen. And we're going to move on to a fish that's actually native to Florida this time, instead of the ones that are all invasive to Florida. We have got the Florida gar, so a really cool fish here. So let's have a look at you over here. So this is a species of gar that's found in the US from the Savannah River to the Onaloxine River, watershed of Georgia, through into Florida. And these guys can get quite large. They're not as large as like alligator gars, but they can get quite big. They can reach over about 3 feet or about 91 centimeters. And they're considered mid-sized. And they typically measure between 51 and 132 centimeters, or 20 to 52 inches. And they typically weigh between 1 to 4 kilograms, or 3 to 9 pounds. And with the largest one recorded being about 10 kilograms. These guys also have these irregular spots and things like that over them. And they actually have a shorter, broader snout. Almost kind of similar to an alligator gar, but not related to them that closely. And in their environments, they tend to live in these like lowland streams, canals, and lakes with muddy bottoms and their underwater vegetation. They're often found in these waters and sometimes hides in weeds to attack prey since they're ambush predators. In terms of reproduction, they usually spawn around late winter to early spring, where the spawning typically occurs between February and May. Groups of both sexes will come along in these shallow, weedy waters where the female discharge their eggs, and the female's eggs will be typically fertilized by multiple males. They hatch and they possess an adhesive organ at the end of the snout, since they attach to vegetation until they are 2 centimeters long, or 0.8 inches. So, following the spawning, the male gars will undergo a decrease in their reproductive parameters throughout the summer, and also these hormones. And when the babies are big enough, the young will feed on like zooplankton and insect larvae. And once they get adults, the adults will mainly eat like fish, shrimp, crayfish, and things like that. And in terms of behavior, they tend to burrow into like sediments and marshes as their habit, and estivate during the dry season. And estivation is similar to hibernation, and this allows them to withstand high temperatures or dry conditions in the summer, for example. And as I mentioned, they're ambush predators. They tend to lunge at their prey, and their strikes are very short and fast, and can be up to only 25 to 40 milliseconds in length. And upon catching their prey, they'll kind of thrash their heads and manipulate their prey before swallowing it head first. And as I mentioned, the adult gar tend to feed on fish, shrimp, and crayfish, while younger gar feed on zooplankton and insect larvae. So they do change their niche throughout their life, which is pretty cool. So, cool little guy here. So next we're going to move on to our next, I think it's our last fish actually. We have got a really cool guy. We've got the West Indian Ocean Coelacanth. So one of the few species of coelacanth. Wonderfully cool animals. So these guys, also known as the African coelacanth or just the coelacanth. These guys are one of the 2 extant living species of coelacanth, which is a rare order of vertebrates. These guys are lobe-finned fishes. They're much less common than a lot of other groups of fish. The other extant species is the Indonesian coelacanth. That's the other species. And they've been known for fishermen, and they've really got a really cool story. They were rediscovered in 1938, because they haven't found them since the Cretaceous, but then they found live ones, and they're like, we thought this group has been extinct for like 66 million years, which is wild. But they are still considered critically endangered, unfortunately, as we'll get into. So the average weight of these large coelacanths is about 80 kilograms, 176 pounds, and they can reach up to 2 meters, 6 feet 5 in length, with adult females generally or being slightly larger than males on average. You can see they have this deep royal blue color with these white spots, and being a deep sea fish, they often look really weird and stuff. They also, similar to like a lot of cartilaginous fish, they also have a rectal gland, pituitary gland, spinal cord, and a pancreas. And also another way that they deal with the pressure is that they adopt an effective mechanism of osmoregulation by retaining urea in their blood. So that's another thing that they do. These guys are also an ovoviviparous species. That means they retain their eggs inside their body until they hatch. And they have a low fecundity because they have a really long gestation period, about 12 months, though not much is known about their age of sexual maturity. So they're usually found at depths between 180 to 210 meters, or 590 to 600 feet down, and sometimes found as deep as 234 meters, 797 feet, or as shallow as 54. And they tend to reside in underwater caves and are more common at these depths. And some individuals actually been seen performing headstands as feeding behavior that allows coelacanths to slurp on prey from these crevices. And they actually also made this possible because they have the ability to move their upper and lower jaw, which is pretty unique in invertebrates. I mean, not vertebrates, invertebrates. And being such just a wild and interesting fish, they also don't really rely on their tail as much as most fish. They are lobe-fin fishes, so they're able to swim almost like a penguin or something with their fins. So they rely more on their fins to swim rather than tail. So in terms of their conservation, they're not very well discovered because they live so deep down, or really well known. They live across the South Africa and the east coast of African coast from Kenya, Madagascar, and small areas. And it's estimated that 2 to 5 coelacanths are accidentally caught each year, which makes up 1% of their population. And it's also estimated about 30% of the population is reduced. And because of this, they are considered, they're very rare. There's believed to be fewer than 500 in the West Indian Ocean. And there's a maximum of 371 population. They're considered critically endangered by the IUCN because of their low population and also their very, very slow reproductive rate. They're really, really cool animals, and they have a really interesting story. As I mentioned, there was lots of, in the early times, they thought these guys were extinct. Coelacanths hadn't been seen, or since the fossil record didn't show that they lived past the Cretaceous extinction, where they killed off the dinosaurs. But it seems like a lot of fishermen had been catching these guys and like, oh, these animals, they look so similar to these guys, and it's often dubbed a living fossil, and it's probably one of the most famous of these living fossils, or Lazarus taxa, have ever been found. And they're very, very beautiful animals, I must admit. I think they're such great animals. I love coelacanths. And really cool that we got Leaf and Buffzoo giving us a wonderful look at these guys. So yeah, really, really cool. Big fan of these coelacanths. So now we're going to move it on to some mammals now. Well, I mean birds and mammals. So we're going to be looking at the snow goose by Leaf. So, and bongo hardwood. So really wonderful guys here. So these are the snow goose. These guys are a species of goose that are native to North America with both white and dark morphs, which is also known as the blue goose or kind of the grey goose. They breed north of the timber line in Greenland, Canada, Alaska, and Siberia. And they spend their winter in warm parts of North America and southwestern British Columbia, through the United States into Mexico. And they've actually one of the few animals where their populations have really, really increased during the 20th century. So these guys, as mentioned, they have these two kind of color morphs where they get the snows and blues. And there is kind of two subspecies, quote unquote, based on their size, though they have some overlaps. A smaller, lesser snow goose lives in central northern Canada to the Bering Straits. That stands about 64 to 79 centimeters tall, or 25 to 31 inches, and weighs 2.5 to 2.7 grams, to 4.5 to 6 pounds. And the larger one live in eastern Canada, averages about 3.2 or 7.1 pounds and 79 centimeters or 31 inches tall, but can weigh up to 4.9 with a wingspan about 135 to 165 centimeters or 53 to 65 inches. So in terms of breeding, they kind of, long-term pairs will usually form about their second year, although breeding does not start until about their third year. They're solely philopatric, where that means they will return to the place that they hatched at birth, so that's another really cute little fact. They often nest in colonies. We'll do that. We'll talk about these cute little babies. So they often nest in colonies, and nesting usually begins at the end of May during the first few days of June, depending on the snow conditions. The female selects a nest site and builds it with its area and the shallow depression, which may be used year after year. After the female lays the first 3 to 5 eggs, she then lies next to the nest with down, with the female incubating the eggs for about 22 to 25 days, and the young leave the nest within a few hours of hatching, since they're born artificial. The young are able to feed themselves and are protected by their parents. By their 50th or 42nd to 50th day, they can fly, but they remain with their families for up to 2 to 3 years old, which is pretty cool. And they also migrate. They migrate between late May and mid-August, but they leave their nesting areas and spend more half the year in their migration in the warmer wintering areas. So they're actually known to fly like more than 3,000 miles or 400,000 kilometers from their wintering areas to the tundra. So they typically travel across the Central Flyway, the Pacific Flyway, lots of different flyways to get down into the small southern parts, especially Mexico and the southern US, where they winter it out. terms of the ecology, they usually feed in flocks, and they also eat a lot of leftover grain in fields. They migrate long distances, and they actually, the population of greater snow geese was in decline, but they seem to have now recovered to sustainable levels. And the snow geese in North America have increased to a point where the tundra breeding areas are almost like degraded, so it often affects the survival of the species. And their main nest predators include Arctic foxes and sukas, also been seen in nesting near snowy owls, which is likely a solution for their predation, but also have been seen getting eaten by North American bears, coyotes, wolves, bald eagles as well. And the population estimated to be above 5 million birds, which more is a 300% increase since the mid-1970s, and has been really increasing. So it's one of the animals that have really been doing well, so that's really cool. And yeah, I think they're just really wonderful animals. So Leaf and Buffzoo did a wonderful job with these goose, and I hope more people like them. Really, really big fan. How cute is that? I am a big fan. So now we're going to move on to another bird. This one was just done by Bongo Hardwood. We have got the saurus crane. So these guys are a large, non-migratory bird, as you can see here. Quite big boys. These guys are found in the Indian subcontinent, Southeast Asia, and Australia. So they are the tallest of the flying birds, and they can stand up to 1.8 meters or 5 feet 11 inches, and are very conspicuous across the open wetlands of South Asia, the flooded forests of Southeast Asia, and the woodlands and grasslands of Australia. So quite a wide-ranging bird. They can be mainly distinguished from other cranes because of their overall grey colour and their red head. And like other cranes, they tend to form these long-lasting bonds and maintain territories where they perform their courtship displays, which includes loud trumpeting and things like that. And their main breeding season is during the raining season, where they build these enormous nest islands, where they have these reeds in nearly 2 meter diameters, which is high enough to stay above the shallow water around it. And also increased agricultural activity had led to decline in their numbers, but they also benefit from wetland crops and construction of canals and reservoirs. So the stronghold of these species is in India, and where they're typically reared and lived in agricultural lands in close proximity to humans, but they have been extirpated from many parts of their range. So yeah, in terms of their size, as I mentioned, they're kind of the world's tallest bird, flying bird, if that is. And they typically get about 6.8 to 7.8 kilograms, or 15 to 17 pounds, with 5 adults even weighing about 8.4 kilograms, with a wingspan of about 220 to 250 centimeters, or 87 to 98 inches. So quite big. As I mentioned, quite common, found in grasslands. They make these long migrations sometimes, though they're normally non-migratory, though some populations will move short distances, depending where they are. Migratory populations are known from Southeast Asia and Australia, but they generally just kind of do their own thing. It depends entirely on the population. So in terms of courtship and breeding, they have these loud trumpeting calls, like the trumpeting cranes and things like that. Really cute little guys here, though, like the babies. They dance and get their females' attention, and they will typically brood in the monsoons in India, but that obviously does change within their range. The nests can be more than 2 meters in diameter, nearly 1 meter high off the ground, and they typically lay 1 to 2 eggs, or really 3 or 4, where both sexes incubate for about 31 days, or about 26 to 35 days. They're chalky eggs, and they weigh about 35 grams. The eggshells are removed by the parents, and they hatch by carrying away the fragments and swallowing them. Not the babies, they swallow the egg fragments. And about 30% of all breeding pairs success in raising chicks each year, and more of the sexual pairs raise 1 or more 2 chicks each, with brood size of 3 being rare, which is pretty cool, but even in some areas it can get up to 60% success rate. And they really have no predators, but they have often get their eggs raided by dingoes, house crows, depending where they live, of course. There's no dingoes in India, or no house crows in Australia. But they seem to be doing pretty well. There's an estimated population of about 15,000 to 20,000 mature cranes, and the most robust of them is the Indian population, numbers about 10,000. They haven't been really hunted too much by humans, but a lot of the agricultural things like rice farming and destroying a lot of the wetlands they live in have kind of caused their populations to decrease, and where they're considered vulnerable. Or vulnerable to extinction, which is obviously not good. And it seems they're considered vulnerable because of this degradation, also inbreeding in some populations. And also interbreeding with bulgur cranes in Australia. But luckily they are considered kind of doing okay. It's just a lot of these big changes that are affecting them, which happens to a lot of species, of course. But I think these guys are really, really cool, and Bongo Wood did a really great job showing them off for us. So next we've got our second to last animal. We have got a cool little guy here. We've got some big marine mammals. Well, not the biggest marine mammals, but we have got, by Leaf and Buffzoo, once again, we have got the Pygmy sperm whale. And a cute little baby that we'll talk about soon. So this is the Pygmy sperm whale, also known as Coga breviceps, which is one of the 2 extant species of dwarf or small sperm whales in the family Coelacanth. And these guys are not much larger than a lot of dolphins. You think of sperm whales, you think of the big, obviously the big giant five-sided sperm whale. But these guys are quite small. They're born at about 1.2 meters long, or 3 feet 11 in birth, and they grow up to 11 feet or 3.5 meters in maturity. Adults will weigh about 400 kilograms or 180 pounds. And you can see their underside is quite creamy with occasional pinkish colors, and they kind of have this counter-shitting going on. That's not too different than other whales. They also have a lower jaw that's very slung low, and their blowhole is on the left, as you can kind of see here. Let's see if you can show it on the left. And their dorsal fin is also very small and hooked, and is actually considerably smaller than the dwarf sperm whale, and that's kind of how it's used to distinguish between pygmy and dwarf sperm whales. Like its giant sperm whale relatives, which I will be covering soon, just as a sneak peek, they have a spermaceti organ, which is in their forehead, which is full of spermaceti, which is an oil that is like a dark red fluid that they, well, that's not the spermaceti, that's another thing I'll talk about, but this allows them to focus sound beams and allows them to dive faster. But they also have a sac in their intestine that contains like a dark red fluid they expel it when they're frightened. It's almost like an ink. So these guys basically convergently evolved ink like octopus, so I think that's really, really cool. In terms of their teeth, they have 20 to 32 teeth in their lower jaw, and they often lack enamel. And these guys have a melon, as I mentioned, with a spermaceti organ, which is not quite as large as a sperm whale's, but this melon allows them, it's like a big thing of fat, and allows them to focus beams of sound that allows them to see, similar to a lot of other dolphins. And in terms of the echolocation, that's what they use to hunt their prey. They produce like high frequency clicks that are mostly ultrasonic, and they're able to like peak them and just use them to see, and it gives them to find prey, which is really, really cool. And in terms of their reproduction, let's see if you can find a little baby. I think this guy is just stupidly adorable, I have to be honest. He's so cute. But these guys, it's not really too well known about their breeding, but it's believed to breed from April to September in the southern hemisphere and March to August in the northern hemisphere. They sexually mature at about 4.5 years old, and virtually all mammals, they reproduce many times throughout their life. Once a female whale is impregnated, the average gestation lasts for 9 to 11 months, which is unusually for cetaceans. They actually give birth to their babies head first, which is very weird for a lot of cetaceans. The newborn calves, as I mentioned, get about 1.2 meters or 3 feet 11 and weigh about 50 kilograms and are weaned after their 1 year of life. And in terms of their lifespan, they can live for up to 23 years. So in terms of looking at their stomach contents from stranded individuals and things, it's believed they feed primarily on cephalopods, particularly bioluminescent species that live in like the mid-water environments. They also eat like glass squids and octopus, also shrimps, and relatively few fish, but they are pretty much adapted to those soft-bodied animals. In terms of predators, they may be eaten by great white sharks and killer whales. And they use this form of ink that they've developed to defend themselves. They'll shoot it when a predator attacking them, and they'll just shoot it out and go shoo, and then just see if they use it for distraction, very much like how an octopus would. They're believed to be found in tropical and temperate waters across the Pacific, Indian, and Atlantic Oceans, though they're occasionally seen off colder waters such as Russia, though they're very rarely sighted at sea because it's such hard to find. They often prefer offshore waters and typically live in waters from 400 to 1,000 meters deep, where they will find lots of like zooplankton and things that obviously feeds their prey. They're really cool guys. In terms of human interaction, they've never been hunted on a large scale like their larger sperm whale relatives, though there have been some impacts, of course, because they don't have that much. Also ambergris as well. And they've been known to kill and been killed in like nets, and also stranded individuals have had plastic bags in their stomachs, which they often mistaken for a cephalopod, which is very bad. And in terms of conservation, I believe they're considered least concern, so there are no issues with their population, partly because we also don't know. But they do face issues such as strikes, getting caught in bycatch, and noise from like ships and also like experiments from the navies and things can hurt their ears. That's been a big issue, but generally they're doing quite well. So a really wonderful animal. So yeah, that was done by Leaf and Buffzoo, and we're going to move on from the Pygmy sperm whale. We're going to move on to another whale. This is like, I really love beaked whales, so we've got a really cool beaked whale today. We have got the northern bottlenose whale. Let's see if we can find you guys here. Look at these wonderful guys. Oh, no, that's not what we wanted. So this is the bottlenose whale, or the northern bottlenose whale. These guys are a species of beaked whale in the Xiphid family, which is one of the two members of its genus. There is the southern beaked whale, which is the one that you find in the Southern Ocean, around Antarctica, New Zealand, Australia. That's the one that I would encounter, but these are the northern species. They're typically hunted heavily in Norway and Britain in the 19th and 20th century, and they're also one of the deepest diving mammals, known to reach depths about 2,339 meters, or 7,674 feet, and are capable of diving for up to 130 minutes, so just over 2 hours, so they're quite well adapted for that, which is really, really cool. And these guys, when physically mature, they can reach about 9.8 meters long, or 32 feet, which is smaller than the giant beaked whales, like the Bart's beaked whale that can get like 13 meters long. But these guys are larger than most southern bottlenose whales. You can also see their melon is sexually dimorphic, with males having larger males that are flattened and more square, while females have rounded melons. So it's kind of a, like, she's a little bit more curvy, of course. These guys, they can color vary, but mostly it's kind of bright white on them, but generally they have this grayish color on them. The dorsal fin is also relatively small, and in terms of their weight, they can get between 5,800 and 7,500 kilograms, or between 12,790 or 6,530 pounds. So between 5 and 7 tons is kind of their general estimate, but they're still quite large animals, as you can see. The oldest recorded age, which is determined by growth layers and the teeth of these guys, was about 37 years old. And in terms of their calves, they will usually have prolonged weaning, and nursing continues until they're about 3 or 4 years old, with males become sexually mature at about 7 to 11 years old, and females at 8 to 12. And they live in deep open ocean waters. They prefer that, so they're not commonly sighted. And they've actually been known to approach vessels sometimes, which made them an easy target for whalers, though they have been known to avoid them as well, so they haven't been too hit by whaling. But they are considered they're considered near threatened, actually, because of a lot of things. Their population is endemic. Is a population endemic to the North Atlantic Ocean, but they're generally found pretty much all over the place. Found Nova Scotia and so around the North Atlantic. So you'd find them like Canada, Greenland, Norway, and those kind of areas. So, as compared to the southern species, which is found across like the Southern Ocean. And they are considered, I believe, as I mentioned, they're not really hunted now. There are still people that kind of hunt them, like the people in the Faroe Islands, but that might be coming to a close. There's been a lot of drama and stuff happening about that, but still a really, really cool animal. And in terms of their population, estimated that their population pre-whaling was 100,000 northern bottlenose whales. And between 1850 and 1973, there were commercial hunting of this species from Norway, Iceland, Greenland, and Labrador, and that reduced their numbers. But they seem to have been doing okay and doing fine. Though the current conservation concerns is not about hunting, but it's things like human activities such as sonar, oil and gas developments, also fishing gear, pollution, and eating plastics, and also ecological shifts because of climate change. So they're considered protected and no one really hunts them anymore. But they are doing okay for the moment. They are considered near threatened. There are some worries to their population, but they are not doing too badly. And I think I really like how these guys came out. It's really cool to see more whales. Really big fan of seeing more whales. And we'll see more whales coming up soon, as you guys will probably be pretty excited. If you keep an eye on the Nexus, you'll see what we'll cover soon. But I think you guys would love that. So I think this will be a great place to end the video today. So yeah, I really hope you guys enjoyed this video. Hope you guys like and subscribe. Always remember to hit the little bell icon to get notified about anything. So yeah, hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. Hope you guys like and subscribe, and bye bye.